The galaxy had forgotten Earth. Once a world filled with life, with dreams and ideas, Earth had become a distant memory. Centuries had passed since humanity had vanished from the stars. The great powers of the galaxy, the powerful alien fleets, the advanced civilizations, had long ago stopped caring about the small blue planet. Earth was just a relic of the past, a place lost to time, buried under the weight of history. But there were a few who never forgot. The elders of the Galactic Council were among them. They were ancient beings, wise and old, who had seen the rise and fall of many civilizations. They had seen things that no one else remembered. And they knew something that others did not. There was a prophecy, a warning passed down through generations, whispered in the darkest corners of the galaxy. The day will come when Earth will rise again. The day will come when those who abandoned it will pay the price for their ignorance. For years, the Council had dismissed the prophecy as nothing more than an old legend, a story meant to keep young minds in check. Humans are gone, they said. They died out long ago. The galaxy had moved on, focusing on new threats, new problems. The humans had been a fleeting moment in history, nothing more. But deep inside the Council, a few still remembered. They knew the stories were not just tales. They were warnings. And as the years passed, they began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, the prophecy was true. It started with a strange signal. It was weak at first, a faint hum that no one could quite place. It came from the edges of the galaxy, from the deep, forgotten space where no one had ventured in centuries. At first, no one paid attention. It was just another anomaly, a blip on the radar of the galaxy's many quiet systems. But then the signal grew stronger. It pulsed with a steady rhythm, almost as if it were alive. Ships in the region picked it up, but none dared investigate. The galaxy had moved past Earth, and the idea that humanity could have returned seemed impossible. Yet the signal continued to grow louder, stronger, undeniable. Some ships went to investigate, hoping to find a natural source for the strange signal. They found nothing except more strange signals, hidden deep in the forgotten regions of space. It wasn't until the Starseeker, one of the galaxy's most advanced reconnaissance ships, was sent to the source that they finally discovered the truth. The crew had been trained for the unknown, for the dangerous and unexplored corners of space. They were prepared for anything, but nothing could have prepared them for what they found. The Starseeker arrived at the location where the signal had originated. It was a dead zone, an area of space that had long been thought to be empty. But as they approached, something unexpected happened. Their sensors began to detect strange readings, readings that didn't belong. At first, they thought it was a malfunction. But when they got closer, they saw something that shouldn't have been there, a massive, ancient structure, floating in the darkness. It was huge, unlike anything they had ever seen before. Covered in strange symbols and designs, the structure seemed to pulse with a life of its own. They called it the human enigma. The crew was nervous, but they couldn't turn back now. They boarded the structure, and what they found inside was even more shocking. Inside, they found evidence of humanity's existence, artifacts, records, and ancient technology. But there was something even more chilling. Hidden deep inside the structure was a series of stasis pods. Each pod contained a human, alive, frozen in time, waiting. It was clear now. Earth was not gone. Humanity had been in hiding, waiting for the right moment to return. But why had they been hiding? And what had they been waiting for? The Starseeker crew sent their findings back to the Galactic Council, but their message was met with disbelief. This is impossible, the leaders of the Council argued. Humans are long gone. These must be remnants of a long-dead species. But as more signals appeared, and as more strange structures were discovered, even the most skeptical leaders couldn't deny it any longer. Earth had survived, and humanity was about to return. In the council chambers, Elder Thalos stood before the others. He had been one of the few to believe the prophecies. Now, as the evidence poured in, he could see the truth in the old warnings. "You ignored the signs," Thelos said quietly, his voice calm but filled with a deep, haunting wisdom. "You laughed at us when we warned you. Now the humans are coming back, and it will not be a peaceful return." The other leaders shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had once laughed at the idea of humanity's return, but now they could feel the weight of their mistake. They had not prepared. They had ignored the elders. And now, it was too late. Thalos turned away from the group and gazed out the window at the stars. The galaxy will soon learn the price of forgetting Earth. The galaxy had been silent for too long. After the mysterious signals from Earth grew stronger, the Galactic Council could no longer deny the truth. Humanity had not only survived, but they were waiting. The elders had been right all along, and now, the galaxy had to face the consequences of ignoring the warning. A fleet of the galaxy's best ships was quickly assembled. Their mission was simple: investigate the source of the signals from Earth and discover what, exactly, humanity had become. No one knew what to expect. Some said it was an ancient human relic, a forgotten artifact from their once powerful civilization. Others whispered darker thoughts. Maybe humanity had returned, not as a peaceful people, but as a force seeking vengeance. Admiral Corin, leader of the expedition, stood on the bridge of the flagship Eclipse. His ship, along with the fleet, was now headed towards Earth's last known location, an area deep within the void, far from the busy systems of the galaxy. It was an area that had been ignored for centuries, a region thought to be empty and without value. "We'll reach the coordinates in 12 hours, the captain of the Eclipse reported. Admiral Corin stared out at the endless blackness, his mind racing. What if Earth was no longer a peaceful world? What if they had returned, but with a thirst for revenge? The galaxy had long since forgotten the humans, and now the thought of facing them again filled many with fear. The silence on the bridge was deafening. The crew worked in a quiet, almost eerie manner, preparing for the unknown. As they approached the coordinates, the tension in the air grew thicker. This was a mission that could change the course of galactic history. Everything they knew could be shattered. As the fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's system, they encountered the first strange sight. The long-dead planet, once full of life, was now a barren wasteland. But it wasn't the emptiness that was alarming. It was the strange, glowing structures that surrounded it. Massive stations, drifting in space like forgotten ghosts, their designs unlike anything the Council had ever seen. It was clear that these were human-made. Admiral Corin gave the order to send scouting ships to investigate. Several small craft were launched, but as they neared the structures, their communication signals began to fade. One by one, the ships disappeared from the radar. "What's happening? Why can't we contact them?" Corin asked, frustration creeping into his voice. "We don't know, sir," replied his communications officer. "They were just there a moment ago. But now, nothing." The fleet waited in silence as the minutes turned to hours. What was happening out there? Why had Earth's systems been silent for so long? The mysteries only deepened, and every moment stretched the tension even further. Suddenly, the Eclipse was rocked by an explosion. "Report," Corin shouted. "We've been hit," the engineer shouted back. "Something from one of the structures just fired on us." The flagship shook again as the sound of the blast echoed through the ship. The crew scrambled to their posts, trying to keep the ship intact. Corin's mind raced. Whoever had fired that shot was not a peaceful people. This wasn't some relic. This was humanity. And humanity wasn't extinct. They were still here. "We're taking damage," the captain reported. "We need to pull back. We can't fight them with our shields down." Corin gripped the railing of the bridge, his knuckles white. "No, we can't retreat. We have to understand what's happening. If we run now, we might never get another chance." The fleet regrouped, and with their weapons armed, they pushed forward toward Earth's surface. What they didn't know was that their movement had triggered something. something that hadn't been awakened in centuries. Slowly, the human structures around them began to power up. Energy surged through the system, and strange ships appeared from within the structures. These ships were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Massive, sleek, and powered by technology centuries ahead of anything the galaxy had developed, the ships moved toward the fleet with terrifying speed. They didn't fire. Not yet. They simply surrounded the fleet, as if studying them. Corin's voice was steady but filled with uncertainty. This is it. They're here. This is humanity. The silence was deafening. The fleet remained suspended in space, surrounded by humanity's ancient warships. The strange, powerful ships that had once been lost to time now surrounded them like a cage. The message was clear. Humanity had returned, and they were not going to make peace. Admiral Corin paced the bridge of the eclipse, trying to gather his thoughts. The unknown ships, with their sleek designs and advanced technology, were nothing like anything the galaxy had ever seen. The last few hours had been nothing but tension. Humanity, it seemed, was not interested in explaining their return. Instead, they watched, waited, and studied the fleet. "We need to make contact," Corin said, his voice tight. He knew there was no turning back now. They had discovered Earth's secret, and now humanity was looking at them, not as visitors, but as enemies. "We have no way of knowing what their intentions are," one of his officers replied. "If we make the wrong move, they might destroy us." Corin nodded. He had no illusions. This wasn't the return of a peaceful people. This was a world that had been forgotten, left to die by the galaxy, only to come back stronger than ever. And now, they were facing a force more powerful than they had ever imagined. He turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to them. We have to try. We can't just sit here forever." The officer hesitated but then nodded, sending the message out to the strange human ships surrounding them. The message was simple. "We are the Galactic Council. We wish to understand your intentions. We seek peace." Minutes passed with no response. The tension on the bridge grew as everyone waited for a reply. It was clear now. Humanity was back, and they were not here to negotiate. Then, just as everyone began to think that no answer would come, the screens flickered. A figure appeared, dark and shadowy at first, but then the image cleared, revealing the human face. The face was familiar, one that had appeared in the ancient records of humanity. It was an elder, someone from the time before Earth had been lost. The figure was dressed in dark armor, standing before a backdrop of stars and ancient ships. "We received your message," the human said in a calm but cold voice. "But we are not interested in peace." Corin's heart sank. He knew the tone well. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a warning. "You've spent centuries ignoring us, letting Earth fade into nothing," the human continued. "But we never forgot. We never stopped preparing. And now you will learn what happens when you forget humanity." The communication screen went black. The message left the fleet in shock. The people of the galaxy had laughed at the warnings, at the prophecy of Earth's return. Now, they were faced with the truth. Humanity had prepared, and they were coming to take back what they had lost. Admiral Corin felt the weight of the moment. He had always believed that humanity was gone, just a footnote in history, but he had been wrong. Earth was not a forgotten relic. It had always been there, waiting. And now, humanity had returned with a vengeance. "We have to act," Corin said, his voice sharp. "We can't wait any longer. If they wanted peace, they would have sent it. Now we prepare for war." The fleet moved into position, readying themselves for what was to come. The human warships remained silent, but their presence was enough to make anyone nervous. The air in the command center was thick with fear and uncertainty. On the bridge of the eclipse, Corin stared out at the dark expanse of space. He could feel the presence of humanity out there, waiting, watching. And he knew that the galaxy was about to learn a hard lesson. As the fleet gathered its forces, a strange new signal cut through the tension. It was faint at first, but then it grew louder. And then, a new message appeared on their screens. You will learn soon enough. Earth is no longer the forgotten world. We will take back what is ours. Prepare yourselves. The fleet's weapons systems powered up. There was no more waiting. Humanity had spoken. The Eclipse and the other ships in the fleet moved into battle formation, but it was clear now. There was no turning back. Admiral Corrin stood at the helm, watching the strange human ships grow larger as they approached. His mind raced. What had happened to humanity in all these years? How had they become so powerful? And what was their end goal? His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden blaring of alarms. The strange human ships had opened fire. Energy blasts erupted from the human warships, striking the fleet with devastating force. The Eclipse shuddered under the impact, and alarms screamed throughout the ship. "Shields up," Corrin shouted. "Return fire." The battle had only just begun, but it already felt like the galaxy was losing. The Eclipse and its fleet had been hit again and again by the powerful weapons of the human warships. Energy blasts tore through shields and armor, sending the ships into chaos. The once confident crew of the Eclipse were now scrambling, trying to maintain control of their vessel in the face of overwhelming force. "Shields at 40%, the chief engineer reported, his voice strained. "We need to regroup," Corrin shouted. He knew the situation was dire, but there was no option for retreat. "Send a message to the rest of the fleet. We have to fall back to a defensive position and hold the line." His orders were quickly relayed, but it was clear the fleet was in disarray. The human ships didn't just have superior firepower, they had strategy. They knew how to fight. They knew how to win. The Eclipse fired back, but the blasts from the human ships were relentless. Each strike felt like a hammer blow, shaking the Eclipse to its core. Admiral Corrin stood on the bridge, watching the chaos unfold. The enemy was unlike anything he had ever faced before. The humans were organized, powerful, and relentless. "Admiral, our weapons systems are malfunctioning," the weapons officer said, looking up from his console. "We're losing power." Corrin gritted his teeth. "Keep fighting," he muttered under his breath. But deep down, he knew they couldn't hold out forever. As the hours stretched on, the situation only worsened. More and more ships fell to the powerful human assault. The fleet's numbers were dwindling, and the remaining ships were no match for the speed and precision of humanity's warships. Every move they made seemed to be anticipated by the enemy. The humans were always one step ahead, their tactics flawless, as though they had known exactly how the battle would play out from the very beginning. Corrin was no fool. He had seen enough to know that the galaxy was outmatched. Humanity was not just a remnant of an ancient civilization. They were a force, and they were on a mission to take back everything that had been lost. "We need a new plan," Corrin said. "We can't win with sheer firepower. We need to think differently." But there was no time. Another explosion rocked the Eclipse, and the lights flickered. A crew member was thrown from their station, their face pale with fear. "Admiral, the humans are boarding," the tactical officer shouted. "Their ships are coming in close. They're preparing for an assault." Corrin's heart sank. This wasn't just a space battle. This was humanity's invasion. They were taking the fight directly to them. Across the battlefield, the human warships began launching boarding pods. They were sleek, fast, and brutal, cutting through space like knives through butter. Soon, the Eclipse's crew could see them. Figures in dark armor, wielding weapons that shimmered with strange energy. The humans were coming for them. The first pod hit the Eclipse with a violent crash, and the hatches exploded open. Soldiers poured out, their movements swift and precise. The crews scrambled to defend themselves, but they were no match for the human warriors. "Take them down," Corrin shouted, grabbing a weapon and leading his crew into battle. But the humans moved like shadows, their technology far superior, and within minutes, The bridge was filled with the sounds of combat. Sparks flew as weapons clashed, and the ship shook with every explosion. Corrin fought with everything he had, but it was clear the humans weren't just fighting for victory. They were fighting for revenge. They were angry, focused, and relentless. Every move they made seemed to be driven by the pain of a long-forgotten history. "Admiral, we can't hold them," the communications officer screamed. "They're everywhere." Corrin's mind raced. There was no way they could stop the human forces. The eclipse was about to fall. But then a thought struck him. If they couldn't defeat them in space, maybe they could make them talk. "Hold on," Corrin shouted. "We need to reach their leader. We need to understand why they're doing this." The battle on the bridge was escalating, but Corrin pushed through the chaos. He fought his way toward the command center, where the human forces had breached the last line of defense. There, standing in the midst of the chaos, was a figure in dark armor. The human leader. Corrin's eyes locked on the figure, and he rushed toward them, pushing through the defenders. The leader raised a hand, signaling his soldiers to stop. There was a moment of silence, an eerie calm amid the destruction. "We can end this," Corrin said, breathless. "We can talk. Why are you doing this?" The human leader stepped forward, his eyes cold and unwavering. "You ignored the warnings. The elders told you, but you didn't listen. We didn't forget. We waited. Now you will learn what happens when you take everything from a people. You will learn what happens when you forget humanity." Corrin's heart pounded in his chest. The words hit him like a thunderclap. The humans hadn't returned just to reclaim their past. They had returned because they had been wronged. They had been abandoned, forgotten by the very galaxy they had once belonged to. "We were never meant to be forgotten," the human leader continued, his voice low and filled with fury. "And now, you will regret that." With a swift motion, the human leader signaled for his troops to advance, and the bridge erupted into chaos once more. But this time, Corrin understood. It wasn't just a battle for survival. This was humanity's revenge. The eclipse was no longer a ship. It was a battlefield. And the war was only just beginning. The eclipse was a wreck. The once proud warship now lay on the edge of destruction. Fires raged in its corridors, alarms blared, and the sound of clashing weapons filled the air. The crew, what was left of them, fought with everything they had, but the human warriors were relentless. The boarding pods had flooded the ship with soldiers, each one moving with terrifying precision. It felt as though humanity had been waiting for this moment for centuries. Admiral Corrin stood at the center of the chaos, his uniform torn and bloodied, his face grim. His people had fought valiantly, but it wasn't enough. The human forces were overwhelming. They were everywhere, tearing through the ship like a storm. Corrin's breath was heavy, his heart pounding in his chest. He had known that the galaxy was underestimating Earth's return, but nothing could have prepared him for this level of destruction. Humanity wasn't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to reclaim everything that had been taken from them. And they weren't stopping until they had it all. "Admiral," came the voice of his first officer, shaking as she entered the bridge. "We've lost control of the ship. The central command is compromised. We can't hold out much longer." Corrin nodded, his eyes dark with resolve. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. There was only one choice left. He stepped forward, gripping the communicator. "This is Admiral Corrin. All remaining ships in the fleet, we need to fall back. Earth has returned, and we are no match for them. We cannot win this battle." There was no hesitation in his voice. The truth was clear. Humanity had returned, but not as allies. They had returned as conquerors, and now they had their hands on the very throat of the galaxy. As the message sent out, Corrin turned to face the shattered view screen. Through the cracked glass, he could see the distant flashes of battle still raging in the depths of space. The enemy warships continued to tear apart the remnants of the fleet. But there, amidst the smoke and debris, one human warship stood out, a massive vessel far larger than the others, and its weapons were now pointed directly at the Eclipse. Corrin swallowed hard. "They're coming," he said, his voice almost a whisper. The human leader, the one who had given him the chilling warning earlier, appeared again on the view screen. This time, the face of the enemy was clear. His eyes were cold, full of rage. There was no remorse in him, only the certainty that humanity had returned to reclaim what had been stolen. "You failed," the leader said, his voice reverberating through the comms. "Now you will learn the price of forgetting us." Corrin's heart pounded as the ship's outer hull groaned under the strain of the enemy's firepower. The Eclipse was dying. The battle was lost. But just as the first wave of energy blasts began to tear into the ship's core, the Admiral did the only thing he could think of. He made a final command. "Set the self-destruct," he ordered. "If we're going down, we're going to make them pay for it." The final countdown began, and the ship's systems locked in the procedure. Corrin had already made peace with the decision, but it was not just about the Eclipse. It was about sending a message. In the depths of space, the human fleet paused for a moment. The towering ships, once so confident, now seemed to hesitate. They had underestimated the depth of humanity's rage, and they had no idea what Corrin's final decision meant. And then, just as the Eclipse was about to tear itself apart, Corrin made one last declaration, a final act of defiance. "We were never meant to be forgotten," he said, his voice steady and full of defiance. "We will never be your victims."